Ladies and gentlemen, when you stop talking, silence becomes a powerful force that forces reflection, not only for the other person, but also for yourself. Silence is not passive, it's a deliberate act that speaks louder than words ever could. For a man who is used to your constant communication, this sudden quietness creates a vacuum that he cannot ignore. It compels him to confront his own thoughts, actions, and feelings in ways that regular dialogue often fails to do. Reflection begins when the noise stops. In the absence of your voice, a man has no choice but to sit with himself. He starts to ask questions. Why has she gone quiet? Did I say or do something wrong? What does her silence mean? These questions aren't just rhetorical, they drive him toward an inward journey that can be uncomfortable but necessary. Silence demands introspection, and introspection demands honesty. In this way, your silence becomes a mirror, forcing him to look at himself and assess not just his actions, but also the dynamics of your relationship. Reflection during silence also reveals priorities. A man who values you in the relationship will take your silence as an opportunity to grow and change. He will dig deep to understand the underlying issues and will often come to realizations that were obscured by the noise of everyday communication. On the other hand, if he avoids reflection and chooses to dismiss or ignore your silence, it reveals his inability or unwillingness to take responsibility. This lack of self-awareness is a telling sign of his emotional maturity or lack thereof. But this process isn't limited to the man. It's also a transformative period for you. Silence gives you the space to reassess your own thoughts and feelings. It's a chance to reconnect with your inner voice and understand what you need and want from the relationship. When you stop talking, you stop reacting, and when you stop reacting, you start thinking. This shift allows you to see the situation more objectively and without the emotional clutter that often accompanies heated exchanges. Silence can also serve as a pause in a narrative, giving both parties the time and space to reset. In this pause, clarity emerges. Patterns of behavior that you may have overlooked in the heat of conversation come into sharper focus. Silence strips away the distractions and allows the core issues to rise to the surface, where they can no longer be ignored. Ultimately, silence is a teacher. It teaches patience, self-control, and the power of deliberate action. It also teaches the value of reflection, not just for the other person, but for yourself. When you stop talking, you create a moment of stillness that can lead to profound insight and transformation. By forcing reflection, your silence becomes a tool for growth, healing, and ultimately empowerment for both you and the man in question. When you stop talking, you disrupt expectations, and this disruption is profoundly unsettling. Communication forms the foundation of relationships, and when one partner steps back from the familiar rhythm, it sends shockwaves through the dynamic. People tend to rely on patterns, routines, and predictable behaviors. When those patterns are broken, it forces a reassessment not only of the situation, but of the roles each person plays. For a man accustomed to your verbal communication, be it loving, questioning, or even confrontational, your silence represents a break in the status quo. Suddenly, the balance he's relied upon no longer exists. Silence replaces certainty with ambiguity, and ambiguity creates discomfort. This discomfort isn't inherently negative. In fact, it's a powerful catalyst for change. When someone feels unsettled, they're pushed to examine the reasons behind their unease. Disrupting expectations through silence often exposes underlying power dynamics in the relationship. Words can sometimes obscure truths, but silence reveals them. It allows you to observe his reaction without interference. Or does he respect your silence and try to understand it, or does he become defensive, dismissive, or even manipulative? These responses tell you more about his character and intentions than any verbal argument ever could. Moreover, silence challenges assumptions. When you stop talking, the other person is left to fill in the blanks. This creates a psychological space where they are forced to reconsider their assumptions about you, your feelings, and the relationship itself. Silence is particularly effective when it's unexpected. It signals that something significant has shifted. It makes a man question his own actions and their impact. It's not about punishment. It's about creating an environment where he has to confront the reality of his behavior without the safety net of immediate reassurance or explanation. In disrupting expectations, silence also resets boundaries. It communicates without words that you will not participate in unhealthy dynamics. If the man in question has taken your communication for granted or used it as a way to deflect responsibility, your silence serves as a powerful boundary that says, I will not engage until there's mutual respect and understanding. This disruption of the usual interaction forces him to meet you at a new level, one that requires effort, self-awareness, and accountability. For you, this silence is not passive but active. It's a conscious choice to step away from patterns that no longer serve you. It's a way of asserting control over your emotional and mental well-being. In doing so, you redefine the rules of engagement not out of spite or manipulation, but as a way of fostering healthier communication and mutual respect. Disrupting expectations through silence is not about withdrawal, but about recalibration. It allows both you and the other person to step back and see the relationship from a fresh perspective. This disruption can lead to growth, deeper understanding, and a stronger foundation, or it can fractures that can't be ignored. Either way, silence becomes a tool for clarity and transformation, enabling you to navigate your relationships with greater intentionality and self-respect. Silence is one of the most effective ways to reveal a man's true intentions. When words are no longer exchanged, his actions take center stage. This shift is crucial because actions often speak louder and more honestly than words. A man can say anything to appease, manipulate, or reassure, but his behavior in the absence of communication reveals what truly drives him. When you stop talking, you create a mirror reflective space where his true character, priorities, and intentions are laid bare. In the silence, there is no room for pretense or performance. If a man is genuinely invested in the relationship, your withdrawal will prompt him to reflect, to approach you with humility, and to seek understanding. His efforts will demonstrate his commitment, his willingness to grow, and his respect for you as a partner. Conversely, if his intentions are selfish or manipulative, your silence will expose this. He may react with anger, blame, or even indifference. He might attempt to provoke you into breaking the silence, using guilt or emotional pressure as tools to regain control. These reactions are revealing. They show whether his focus is on repairing the relationship or simply maintaining his own sense of dominance or convenience. Silence also tests the depth of his empathy. A man who cares about you will seek to understand the reasons behind your silence. He will recognize it as a signal of something deeper, whether it's pain, frustration, or a need for space. Instead of rushing to defend himself or dismiss your feelings, he will approach the situation with curiosity and compassion. This is a sign of emotional maturity and a willingness to meet you where you are. The beauty of using silence as a mirror lies in its simplicity. You don't need to explain yourself, justify your actions, or engage in arguments. The silence speaks for itself. It places the responsibility on him to reflect and act. His reaction or lack thereof will tell you everything you need to know about his priorities and values. It's important to note that silence isn't about playing games or manipulating the other person. It's a tool for clarity, a way to step back and observe without interference. It allows you to see the situation as it truly is, without the distortion of words. And in that clarity, you gain the power to make informed decisions about your relationship. For you, this process is also a reflection of your own boundaries and self-respect. By stepping back and allowing silence to take its course, you communicate that your time, energy, and emotions are valuable. You assert your right to be treated with respect and to engage in relationships that are reciprocal and meaningful. In the end, silence reveals not only his intentions, but also your own strength. It's a reminder that you don't need to chase, convince, or over-explain. The truth will surface naturally, and with that truth comes the freedom to choose a path that aligns with your dignity and worth. When communication halts and silence fills the space between you, it creates a critical opportunity to evaluate the foundation of your relationship. Silence is not merely an absence of words, it's a deliberate pause that forces both individuals to confront the state of their connection. This silence becomes a test, a way to measure a man's understanding of the dynamics between you and his capacity to nurture a relationship with depth and care. In the absence of conversation, the question arises, how does he respond to this void? His reaction provides insight into whether he views the relationship as a genuine partnership or as something more transactional or superficial. A man who values and understands the relationship will not take silence lightly. He will recognize it as a signal that something needs attention, whether it's an issue to resolve, a need for clarity, or an opportunity to show emotional investment. His understanding is reflected in how he approaches the silence. Does he seek to bridge the gap with meaningful actions? Does he initiate dialogue with humility and a desire to listen? These are signs of someone who values the relationship as a two-way street, who sees you as a person with thoughts, feelings, and boundaries that deserve respect. On the other hand, silence can expose a lack of understanding or even disregard for the relationship. If his reaction is to dismiss, ignore, or retaliate, it speaks volumes about his priorities. A man who truly understands the dynamics of a healthy relationship will not resort to blame or manipulation in the face of silence. Instead, he will reflect on his own behavior and consider how his actions may have contributed to the situation. Silence also tests whether he understands the balance of giving and receiving in the relationship. Healthy partnerships are built on mutual effort, respect, and emotional reciprocity. A man who recognizes this will not wait for you to always take the first step. He will use the silence as a moment to take responsibility, to show initiative, and to demonstrate his commitment to resolving conflicts or strengthening the bond. Furthermore, silence highlights his emotional intelligence. A man who values and understands the relationship will approach the silence with patience and empathy. He won't rush to conclusions or assume the worst. Instead, he will see it as an opportunity to grow closer to understand your needs better and to show his willingness to adapt and improve. Ultimately, silence serves as a litmus test for the strength of the relationship. It reveals whether the man in question is willing to invest in understanding you, valuing your perspective, and addressing the complexities that come with building a meaningful connection. By observing how he reacts to silence, you gain a clearer picture of whether the relationship is built on a solid foundation or whether it's time to reconsider its viability. This understanding empowers you. It reminds you that silence isn't just a void, it's a powerful tool for self-respect and self-discovery. Through silence, you learn not only about him, but also about your own worth and the standards you deserve in a relationship. When you withdraw from conversation and allow silence to fill the space, you create an environment that invites reflection and growth. Silence forces a man to sit with his thoughts, his emotions, and the reality of his actions without the distraction of verbal exchange. This can be an uncomfortable but necessary process, one that demands introspection and accountability. In many relationships, people fall into habitual communication patterns that can obscure deeper issues. By breaking the cycle with silence, you give both yourself and the other person the opportunity to step back and evaluate the situation with clarity. For the man, this pause can serve as a mirror reflecting his behavior, choices, and the impact he has had on the relationship. During this period, he may begin to question his own actions and motives. Has he been dismissive, inattentive, or unkind? Has he failed to meet your needs or respect your boundaries? These are not questions you need to ask for him. The silence asks them for you. It's a moment of reckoning that forces him to confront his role in the relationship dynamic. Moreover, silence can also bring to light whether he is capable of growth. Growth requires humility and the ability to admit one's flaws and mistakes. It's about recognizing areas where improvement is needed and taking proactive steps to become better, not for the sake of appeasing someone else, but for personal development. A man who values the relationship and himself will use this time to reflect on how he can improve as a partner, a listener, and an individual. This period of silence also creates space for him to determine what truly matters to him. In the absence of your voice, he has the chance to ask himself whether he values the connection enough to put in the effort to mend and strengthen it. Silence can be a catalyst for him to realign his priorities, recognizing the importance of the relationship and the work required to sustain it. On the other hand, silence may also reveal stagnation. If he responds to the quiet with indifference, avoidance, or defensiveness, it becomes clear that he lacks the capacity for reflection and growth. A man unwilling to engage with his own shortcomings is unlikely to evolve, leaving little room for a healthy and fulfilling partnership. As he reflects, the silence also offers you a chance to observe his actions or lack thereof. Growth is demonstrated through behavior, not promises or apologies. Does he take steps to show he's willing to change? Does he make an effort to reach out in a meaningful way? Acknowledging his missteps and expressing a genuine desire to repair the relationship. Ultimately, silence is a tool for transformation. It tests whether a man is willing to step into a space of discomfort and use it as an opportunity to grow. For you, it's a reminder of your own strength and the value of self-respect. When you choose silence, you are not only giving him a chance to reflect, but also affirming your own boundaries and the standards you hold for a meaningful connection. Silence is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness or submission, but in truth, it can be a powerful form of communication. When you stop talking, particularly in situations of conflict or tension, you remove the opportunity for the other person to engage in defensive arguments, manipulation, or dismissiveness. This shift in dynamics forces a rebalancing of power, creating space for self-assertion without the need for words. When you choose silence, you signal that you are stepping back to observe, evaluate, and prioritize your thoughts. This act alone can unsettle a man who is accustomed to engaging in predictable verbal exchanges. In many cases, individuals use arguments or conversations to assert control, dominate the narrative, or evade accountability. By refraining from responding, you disrupt this cycle and reclaim agency over the interaction. Silence demands attention. In a world saturated with noise, your choice to withhold words becomes noticeable. It encourages a man to question why you stopped speaking, prompting him to reflect on his own actions, behavior, or attitudes. This subtle shift in focus can be transformative as it compels him to recognize that his words or actions have led to this moment of quiet. Moreover, silence allows you to conserve your energy. Rather than expending effort on arguments or explanations that may fall on deaf ears, you redirect your focus inward. You prioritize your peace, dignity, and self-worth, demonstrating that you will not engage in fruitless conversations. This act of self-preservation speaks volumes about your strength and resilience. For the man on the receiving end of your silence, this can be a moment of reckoning. It challenges him to consider his role in the relationship dynamic and to confront any behaviors that may have contributed to the silence. He may begin to question whether he has been dismissive, hurtful, or neglectful. The absence of your voice serves as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of his actions and the imbalance that may exist in the relationship. Silence also tests the man's character. A mature and emotionally intelligent individual will seek to understand the reasons behind your silence and work to address the underlying issues. He will approach you with respect, patience, and a willingness to listen. On the other hand, a man who reacts with frustration, anger, or indifference reveals his inability to handle conflict constructively, further affirming your choice to disengage. In the long term, silence can redefine the power dynamics of a relationship. It establishes clear boundaries and communicates that you value your own well-being over engaging in unproductive exchanges. It signals that you are not afraid to walk away from situations that do not honor your worth. Ultimately, silence is not just the absence of words. It is a deliberate choice to assert control over how you engage with others. It is a reminder that strength does not always lie in speaking up, but in knowing when to remain quiet, when to walk away, and when to let your actions speak louder than any words ever could.